Well, welcome to everybody, and we have Dorothy and Gary and our special guest Peter Buckley, Joe Stadola. We have David Spinney, and we're going to have some more people coming in, but we'll go ahead and get started, and I'll give all of you who have sort of never heard this speech before, I'm going to give you a little thing about me, and then we'll go into tonight. So I'm Jerry Allen. I'm running for the Senate here in Oregon because in this time of crisis, we need competent, truthful, cooperative leaders in the legislature. And we've got to help rebuild the backbone of our economy, small business, which will create jobs for Oregonians across our state. We've got to address the health and economic impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. We have to work on affordable housing for our families. We have to deepen our protection from wildfires. We have to support revitalizing agriculture and small farmers to feed our communities. And we have to support continuing to improve our educational system and create jobs for our kids. I'm a small farmer and a fire district volunteer. I also have a background as a hospital executive, a social work supervisor, a clinic founder, and 4 terms as an elected financial pension trustee. I have the experience and I understand the need to work together to be an effective state senator. Here's my pledge to you. I will not run away from the job. I will report to work. I'll advocate strongly for the communities of rural Southern Oregon to get our fair share of assistance and rebuilding money. I won't waste public money. I'll tell the truth and I'll be transparent in my work as a state senator. So there you have it. That's my pledge to you. And I want to introduce our topic tonight, and then we'll go to our special guest. So we're going to be talking about empowering and supporting our caregivers. Our caregivers of every type, whether they work in a nursing home, or whether they're an ER doctor or a nurse or an emergency medical responder, a first line responder, an ambulance person, a teacher, an essential job person who is facing the public every day. They're feeling the weight of this coronavirus crisis. And we've all seen the news reports about people who are buckling under that weight. There's been a lot of suicides of physicians. It's a tough time for many, many people. So a big question is, how can we support them, all of these caregivers, to keep them in the fight and help them take care of themselves so that they can continue to survive to serve? And I'm fortunate and pleased to have with us tonight Peter Buckley. And I'm going to say a couple things about Peter before I give him the floor. Peter served in the state legislature as a state representative for South Jackson County from 2005 to 2017. So he has a long history in the legislature. He was elected by his colleague to the House Democratic leadership team. He worked together with then Representative Jeff Merkley to help take the majority in the House here in Oregon in the 2006 election. He served as chair of the House Education Committee, was appointed to co-chair of the Joint Committee on Ways and Means, Budget Writing Committee. He did a lot of work after the Great Recession to figure out how we were going to rebuild Oregon. So he's been through this rodeo more than once. And hope you don't mind my Western slang here. He served on the State Budget Committee, and he has a strong priority for all levels of education, access to affordable health care, housing, and the environment. And now that he's doing something else, he is working with Southern Oregon Success, a collective impact initiative for Jackson and Josephine counties, focusing on children, families, schools, and communities. Welcome, Peter Buckley. Thank you for coming.
Thanks, Jerry. It's great to be with you. And this is a great topic to go into. But part of the work that I've been involved with the last 4 years as I transitioned out of the legislature with Southern Oregon Success has been around adversity and resilience. And what's been really fascinating to learn, I've learned a lot in the last couple of years, in terms of what actually builds resilience in individuals and families and in communities as well. And one of the main factors that builds resilience is connections. So in a quick answer to your question about how can we support caregivers, it's keep our connections strong with them. Text them, call them, bake a dinner, leave it on their porch. Anything that we can do to strengthen our connection with people who are on the front lines, it helps build their resilience as they're moving through what they have to go through in order to keep the rest of us safe. A real kind of simple way to look at resilience is the more healthy connections that you have, the more resilient you are. It doesn't matter whether you're a little kid, and it's really important for little kids to have caring and competent adults in their lives, but it's also very important for all of us, even those of us in our 60s and 70s and 80s. The more healthy, positive connections we have, the more resilient we are. I'll tell a quick story about my brother Marty, who was a soccer coach for many years at the Air Force Academy, and he came down with cancer in about a dozen years ago. He started struggling with cancer and with skin cancer, and he beat every medical prediction that ever came his way. He lasted far longer than anybody ever could have imagined that he could last. All the doctors were saying that, oh no, he's going to be gone in a couple of years. He lasted almost a dozen years, and that was because of the connections he had with people all over the country, his former players, his colleagues. He had so many positive connections in his life, it just kept him going. So when we talk about our caregivers, we talk about the people that are on the front lines, it's our responsibility to keep strong connections with them. Make sure they understand that we are rooting for them, we understand what they're doing, and we're there to help them. There's some other great data that's come out recently from the state of Washington that if people believe they have two or more people in their lives that will help them if they ask for help, their outcomes improve tremendously. Their health outcomes, their social outcomes, they improve just by that belief that they have two or more people in their lives who they can call to. If they call in the middle of the night and say, I'm having a problem, can you help? So we can all be that person for the folks who are the teachers in our lives and the healthcare workers in our lives, the child care workers in our lives, people who are working child care right now for parents of essential workers who are parents needing care for their kids. I mean, these are frontline people putting themselves in danger every day. And if we can stay connected with them and stay strong with them, then we can help them. We can help build the resilience that they feel in their lives.
That's great. What you're saying reminds me of something I saw very recently. Is a quote from Stephen Covey. He said, change moves at the speed of trust.
That's right.
And I was just thinking about it after I read that. And I was thinking, well, how can we build trust? Build trust across party lines, across age differences, across class differences, socioeconomic class differences, across rural and urban. We got all of these different parameters of difference, and yet underneath that, there's a possibility of us learning to more deeply trust each other and to be there for each other. And if we can do that, like what you've just said, for our caregivers are going to be stronger and they're going to be able to hang in there, because we're not done with this virus situation.
No,
Far
no,
from
we're not.
We're not done.
No, no. And when we talked over the weekend, you mentioned the book Trauma Stewardship, which is a great book if people haven't read it yet. It talks a lot about how people adjust either negatively or positively to the trauma they experience. And one of the things the author talks about is not only the connections in your life, really making sure that those are strong, but always having a plan B. You're in this position right now, you're doing what you're doing, but knowing that you could do something else if you need to have food on your table and be able to have a roof over your head. That's a really important thing too, to have a plan B. So as much as we can to help people who are on the front lines understand that they do have other options as well. If they start to feel like they're reaching the edge, that there's someplace else for them to go, that it doesn't have to be suicide, like you mentioned, which is much too prevalent in essential workers.
I'm going to ask you another question. Before that, I want to remind everybody that there's a chat box on your screen. If you're on a computer, the chat box is at the bottom. And if you're on a cell phone, I believe the chat box might be over at the side. But you can ask questions, and Jerry Ventura, who's not seen right now, but she's behind the screen, she will collect those questions and feed those into the process so that you can actually unmute yourself and ask those questions directly. So I wanted to ask you, Peter, if you would, you told me something the other day that I was really touched by, that was about families reaching out and developing connections with other families. And I think it's a kind of a poignant illustration. And I wonder if you'd be willing to share that with us.
Yeah, part of the work with Southern Order Success that we've done is we interviewed 44 different people, different families, different systems leaders from December through May. And even before COVID hit, we were getting a lot of information from the interviews that we did about the level of anxiety that people are feeling right now. You know, that the housing crisis is real. It's very real in Josephine County. You know, Grants Pass is like the third most impacted community in the country in terms of the lack of affordability compared to what people make in their salaries and the housing costs. Cave Junction is hit without, Cave Junction does not have housing nearly at the level that needs to happen. And people are feeling tremendously anxious. And that I heard that in interviews from people that were CEOs of major health corps organizations to people that were living in Cave Junction and other places as well. That level of anxiety is pretty unprecedented. I had a chance to talk to the lactation specialist at Southern Oregon Pediatrics, and she's been a specialist there for 16 years. And she said, even before COVID, she's never experienced the level of anxiety and depression that she's experiencing now with the women that she's working with who are new moms. And she said the one thing that has brought people forward, the one thing that has helped is that connections piece. They had, before COVID happened, they had a moms group, and the moms group would come, they'd meet together once a month at the Southern Oregon Pediatrics office. And they would just talk about what they're going through as moms, what they're experiencing. And what she found was as we moved into COVID and we all are on Zoom now, the moms group, the participants in the moms group kept saying, we need more meetings. We need more connections with each other. And so they started having additional moms groups meetings via Zoom. And that is the thing that's been the most positive to help the women who are experiencing that level of anxiety and depression. So it's that kind of peer conversation, that the holding the space to have that peer conversation and that supportive conversation. That's what helps people get through this. Now they're talking about maybe they're going to try to do a meeting in a park in Medford and stay 6 feet away from each other in the park and still see if they can meet in person. But it's such an essential part that peer connection and that peer support is so essential.
That's great. And that actually, you know, I want to comment about a question that I see on the screen here. Michelle had said, I don't know any caregivers locally. How can I connect with them? And I think that's an interesting question. Like if we know school teachers, or if we know foster parents, or if we know foster parent association, we have, I know in Josephine County, we have a very active foster parent group. It's large because there are a lot of children in need. And that is a caregiving work that is very hard. I've got a lot of experience with that, having been a social work supervisor. It's a tough job, and those people need support. I know people who serve as respite foster parents are able to do that. So I think that's one area. We look around us, and we may find people. And so I want to talk about support groups for just a little bit, because support groups, you're talking about that with Zoom. And that's the way we're doing it right now, because that's what we've got that's safe. But the power of support groups, I want to debunk something about it, which is you don't need to be a therapist to do a support group. You just don't. You need to be a caring, concerned listener and supporter, somebody who's willing to listen to what people have to say and to empathize with them and give them room to talk. And it's amazing what that does. There was a therapist long ago, Carl Rogers, who said, you know, that is far, far and away more important than your degrees, is being a caring, supporting listener. And I would submit that we can all do that. We might find places where we can do it, and or situations where we can do it. We got to do it over the computer right now. But I don't know if you have any comments about support groups, Peter. I welcome your thoughts on that.
Well, it just all the data from the resilience studies show that, again, I keep repeating myself about connections, but that's how connections are made. Support groups are a great way to make connections with each other. Moms groups, dads groups, law enforcement groups, people talking with each other. It just makes so much sense, and it just helps so much for people to understand that other people are going through the same things that they're going through, that nobody's got this thing wired, no one's got this thing, no one's perfect on all this, and to exchange some ideas, to have some creative ideas back and forth on how you might adjust things. I recently learned about this initiative called, I don't know if you had a chance to look it up, Jerry, the Family Independence Initiative. And it's a nationwide initiative, and it actually got one of those MacArthur Genius Grants because it's a genius idea. What they do is that they find families, like a group of 5 or 6 families, that will commit to work with each other for 2 years. And they can work via Zoom, they work via a technology platform, but they just say, yeah, we will meet together once a month for 2 years, and we will leverage resources with each other. And we'll try to help each other meet the goals that each family sets. So each family sets goals. They say, I've got an 18-year-old, he's been out of high school for a year. We're hoping to get him back and get him through Road Community College, and we need $400 to make that work. Well, the families can leverage resources with each other or leverage resources from the initiative itself to help make that happen. And they've got probably now it's almost a 7-year track record of facilitating families working together, leveraging resources between families, sharing those kind of concerns and challenges they have, and moving people into better outcomes. It's really a remarkable initiative. Department of Human Services has pilot projects in Oregon, in Licking County and in Jefferson County right now. And it's my hope that we can get Jackson and Josephine County as included a pilot project going forward to help organize families to make their own decisions. No one's making the decisions for them. They're making their own decisions of what their family needs, how their family can help other families, and how with just a little bit of financial support, I mean, we're not talking huge, we're talking a few $100s, a little bit of financial support, we can move people to better outcomes.
Yes, this really counteracts the isolation that people feel. Everybody that I talk to talks about how isolated.
Oh, the social isolation right now. I mean, again, even before the pandemic, social isolation was rising up as a huge cause of suicides, obviously, of negative outcomes. So it's very important for us.
And it's a huge issue with our elders too, because they are really, a lot of them, especially if they're in care homes, they're very, very isolated. And that is probably a factor in people dying more in the nursing homes and care facilities. They feel so isolated.
Absolutely.
I have a question that I see here that Michelle had asked, and I don't know, Jerry Ventura, if you want to
I'm unmuted.
Unmute Michelle, would you like to ask Peter your question?
She's unmute. Well, she may have to unmute herself. There she is. Go ahead.
Hello, Peter. Wonderful to see you.
You too.
Thank you always for the amazing work that you're initiating in our community and sustaining it. Thank you. So Actually, David and I are both respite foster parents, and I've been reaching out to those parents, and they have been like, oh, we don't need anything right now. So I think it's time to call them up again.
Yeah.
Let them know. I've been calling them about once a month, to let them know I'm thinking about them and so on. But
Nice.
what other ways that I might be able to support caregivers in the community? And then just curious if Southern Oregon Success is providing any opportunities for that.
Yeah, we try to be kind of a clearinghouse, try to link people together. Hearts with a Mission is one of our partner organizations, and they have their program, Safe Families for Children. I don't know if you're familiar with that program, but it's the wraparound program for families before the children go into foster care, to try to keep children out of foster care. And Safe Families for Children, they need a lot of support for the families that are hosting children before they go into foster care, so they don't have to go into foster care. So I'm glad to link you up with the Hearts with a Mission folks that are part of that program at DHS. And then I have plenty of contacts in the human services world, with the Maslow Project, the people in the front lines there, with the healthcare organizations. So I put my email address in the chat. And I think, Michelle, you have my email address, I think. But, but you can email me and tell me what you would like to try, who you'd like to try to contact with. And that's part of my job, is try to connect people together.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. I'll tell you a quick story. This is kind of fun. We have, every month we have our youth development work group meets. And it's organizations like Boys and Girls Club and DHS and school districts and anybody who works with kids and families. And in April, Listo, with the Latinx organization for literacy, they came to the group and they said, hey, we have 83 families that are in need of basic needs. I mean, rent, food, diapers. We have 83 families that are really up against the wall right now. And it was such a wonderful Zoom meeting in April, because we had College Dreams, if you're aware of that organization. College Dreams is an organization that's looking at helping kids get on to going to college or getting into a career. And then we had the Rogue Work Source, which is the help that people get jobs and employment agency. But they both immediately jumped at it and said, we will help get essential things to your 83 families. So they organized with Southern Oregon Gleaners, which is an organization that gleans food from people so it doesn't go to waste. And they, the Work Source folks packed food boxes with Southern Oregon Gleaners, and College Dreams used their vans to distribute food boxes and rent checks and diapers to 83 families. It was a wonderful experience to watch them work together that way. So that's what we're trying to do, trying to weave together all these organizations that have the ability to combine their resources to help families.
Wonderful. Inspiring story. Thank you.
It made my month, I tell you. It took about 10 minutes for them to organize too. It's kind of like, well, I'll do this, and I'll do this. I was kind of like, okay, you guys go.
So if we roll up our sleeves, Peter, and we build these kind of connections between people and between all the different aspects of our communities, we can rebuild Oregon better.
Absolutely.
We can really do this. There's no reason we can't do it, and we don't need to wait until January 20th or whoever is in office. We don't need to wait until somebody gives us permission to do the right thing. We can do it now. And,
so, Jerry, I was on the Zoom with the director of UCAN today, which is the community action agency for Josephine County. They actually have, and they asked me to please spread the word. They actually have resources through the CARES Act that are not being accessed by people in Josephine County. They have rental assistance, they have utilities assistance, they have food assistance, and yet they can't find people to give it to because a kind of communication gap. So for any of you that are working in your communities, please have them go to UCAN and please have them ask for these resources because they're available and they're looking for people to help. And God knows there are people that need help in Josephine and Jackson counties.
Peter, do they want, would they like that information shared with some of these other, I mean, we've got lots of groups and lots of candidates that can share that information. Jerry
Absolutely.
included.
I'll email Jerry. They sent me their kind of list of things they have available. I'll send it to Jerry, and if he can send it out to people, that would be great.
I think
Well,
that's
we could put that on my website too, so that we have, because we have other things on the website, all the listings about where you can go to get help with jobs assistance and all that
Right.
kind of stuff. Well, we can put all these things on there. There's no reason not to. That's a great idea.
Just quick question. So just if someone, like I want to text a single mom that I'm working with right now that really needs help, and just tell her go to youcan.org.
Let me see. I can find Kelly Wessels is their executive director. Let me see if I can find what their email is.
Great.
Yeah, it's UCAN CAP for it's UCANCAP.org.
Okay.
youcancap.org.
And then Kelly's name?
Kelly Wessels. Kelly, and with no E, or Kelley, and then Wessels.
This woman does not have a computer.
She can call Kelly.
She's
Let
not
me see.
doing email.
Yep.
Do you have a phone number there?
I bet I can find one for you.
Yeah, because I want to get this to her tonight. She's been telling me, this is one person who is receiving my support graciously, and I want to be able to give this to her right away.
Phone number is 541-956-4050.
Yahoo! Thank you.
That's great. You know, I want to put in a plug for the foster care program, because we have a great shortage in Josephine County of people who can do who are licensed to be foster parents, and that is forcing DHS to split up families of children who come into care. Of course, we want to avoid them coming into care if possible. And Peter mentioned the wraparound program, and that I was very involved in that. And when I was in social work in California, we can do a lot to help children keep their legacy of family. But for those that do have to go into care, it is heartbreaking for children to have to get split up. Like, say, a family of 3 children,
Yep.
and then they have to go into different foster homes because there aren't enough foster homes to take all 3 of them in one home. And it's just tremendously difficult. So I just want to encourage people to think about that you could be a foster parent, you could be a respite foster parent, somebody who just helps people who are, again, it's the issue of caregivers have to survive to serve. And we have to figure out how can we help them to hang in there with what they're doing. Well, there's many ways that Peter's just described that we can do that. So I think that whole fostering system is an important one. We have a lot of families here in Southern Oregon who are migrant families that come to do agricultural work.
Right.
And they're up against it as well, because they don't qualify for any benefits. They don't qualify for hardly anything, but they are here to do the labor, to pick the fruits and vegetables that people depend on to eat. And the farmers depend on them because they have to have people to harvest. So there's things that we can do to help lend a human hand in those situations as well. And if you have more questions about that, get in touch with me, and I'll do some research and find some leads there that we can follow. Does anybody else have more questions? I see, looks like Gary and Dorothy have a question.
I'm reading that question right now, and it's a really good question. They are too low paid. I mean, this has to change. Um, there are programs to help people find better jobs. Rogue Workforce Partnership has developed several pathway programs, and Rogue Community College too has done a really great job where people can actually go to Rogue Community College and look at pathways that within a year, if they stick to it, they can get the training needed to get to a living wage job. And then there's financial aid available as well to help them get through the Rogue Community College tuition, etc. But that's the challenge. The challenge is people need to do the training to step up. Rogue Workforce Partnership is doing certified nurse assistant trainings, and Rogue Community College has a healthcare pathway that people can see that if they stick with it for even less than a year, they will be able to get to a living wage job in a caregiving and healthcare profession. So I strongly encourage people to go to the Rogue Community College website. I think it's called So Hope is their program, Southern Oregon Hope, which allows folks to see what that pathway is and get some financial assistance to move down that pathway. So those pathways are available.
You know, I know someone who just did that. Someone I'm acquainted with had no real training in jobs that could be a living wage job, and she went to the Rogue Community College. She took some courses here in Grants Pass in that campus, and she took some over in Medford, and went through that whole program and became licensed as a pharmacy tech, where
Nice.
she can make a decent living doing that. And boy, I'll tell you, that put a smile on her face. She put a lot of work into it. It was a long pathway. She wasn't somebody who was skilled in algebra. She'd come over to our house and say, "Wow, I've got to work on this homework. I can't figure this out." And we'd sit down, and my son is better at it than I am. and she'd get help on algebra, and eventually she didn't need the help anymore because she mastered it. And but it was lovely to see somebody reach into that kind of a program, and the folks in Grants Pass were amazing. They helped her so much. They gave her support. They gave her a computer connection to work through the thing with, and it's just amazing the level of resources that are there. And I think that each of us, just to soapbox this for just another moment, each of us has a possibility of being the cheerleader for somebody who maybe doesn't feel much confidence. I've experienced a lot of people who don't maybe have any family history of somebody rooting for them. So we can be the ones who root for them and say, you know, you could do this. You could go talk to these folks and find out what might interest you, find out what your aptitudes are, and then pursue that. And one by one connection with people, we can help people to move themselves in a better direction.
So a couple things off that, Jerry. I got to tell an Alan Bates story. Former State Senator Alan Bates, who was just such an incredible advocate for families, children, healthcare access, etc. He's the one who got the money to start the program with Rogue Community College. And I got to give RCC a lot of credit because they really have grabbed onto it, that wraparound service idea. They want to ideally have wraparound services for every student that goes to RCC to make sure that every student can succeed and get to a living wage job. But Bates was a pain in the butt. I was doing the budget. I was the budget chair, and he was the chair of the healthcare subcommittee. And we were in total crisis. We're cutting programs left and right. And Bates comes to me and says, "You got to get me $250,000 for RCC." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He said, "I want $250,000 for RCC. I got this idea about wraparound services and getting people from TANF into living wage jobs." And I'm going, "Bates, you're nuts. We're cutting programs left and right." And he simply looked at me and said, "Well, you want my vote on your budgets or not?" And, so we found the dollars. We found the way to get the dollars for Senator Bates so he could start this program at RCC. And they've been able to show the rest of the state, if we do this, we get these results. If we give people the support they need, they will get into living wage jobs. So it's a great program, and I give Bates all the credit in the world, and I give RCC all the credit in the world too.
That's great. That's a moving story.
And that's something you can do in the Senate too, Jerry. You can be a pain in the butt too. I know you can. I'm sure you can.
Well, one of the things that they talk about is that very often when the money gets figured out, these rural Southern Oregon areas don't get as much. Money flows sort of slowly down to Southern Oregon.
Right.
So that's one of the things that I want to fight for, is to figure out how can we get adequate funding for Southern Oregon and rural Oregon. And in fact, I'll just segue to say that one of the town halls we're going to do very soon, I don't have the date for it yet, is going to be about how we fund the rebuilding of Oregon, to rebuild a cleaner, greener, inclusive, more just Oregon. How do we do the funding for that? And I've got a lot of people in the investment community who have good ideas, and we're going to work on that too, because I refuse to believe that just because we're going to have a hard time with a budget, which we will, it's inevitable. We're going to have a hard time, but we can still do these things. We've got to do them. The people are depending on us to do them.
Absolutely.
So Jerry,
Absolutely.
there's another question from David, and he's asking how can we help teachers and parents who are going to again be managing remote learning with their kids? That's a biggie. Good question, David.
So yeah, it's a great question. So one of the things is that the districts are coming up with their plans right now. They have to have their plans solidified by mid-August, but the governor's office hasn't come back with more guidance by August 11th, I'm told. We can be involved with that process. There was a proposal that the New York Times columnist had last week, talking about, okay, we have families that have to get their kids back to school because they have to go back to work. They need money to survive. There are other families that can do remote learning. What if schools opened up distance learning centers on campuses, so that, for instance, a middle school gymnasium could be used as a remote learning center, that parents who had to have their kids in school could have their kids there in a safe place, supervised by adults who could help tutor them as necessary and safely tutor them. So I think we need to be part of the discussion, to continue to encourage our school districts, and I know the governor's going to do this too, but to pay attention to the science. I think California did a really good job of setting out the kind of requirements for a school to be able to safely open, that they have to have a decrease in coronavirus cases over a period of time. They have to have testing capacity, and the testing capacity has to show that they have less than 8% positive tests. And then they also have to have healthcare capacity as well. If they can show they have those things, they can open safely, hopefully, but be ready to close down immediately should cases increase. I think we need to be voices in that discussion, and to be telling for your school district, Grants Pass School District, look, we don't want to open schools just to open schools. We want to try to address this issue in a way that actually addresses the needs of the families that have to go back to work because otherwise they won't survive, as well as the needs of the families who are not going to send their kids to school while there's still a deadly virus that is moving through our community. So that's the support I think our teachers need. I've been talking a lot to folks, both Three Rivers and Grants Pass. They're getting tons of calls. They're getting calls from parents on both sides. Parents who are saying, like, don't you dare reopen schools. I'm not bringing my child back there. I'm not going to let you threaten my child's life or the teachers' lives. But they're also getting calls from people who are saying, I don't know what to do. I don't have childcare. I have to go back to work. I have a 7-year-old. I don't know what to do. So we can be a voice that says, let's do this safely in a way that addresses the needs of all families. And let's try to get through this year, because it's gonna be a very hard year, but let's try to get through this year in the best way possible that keeps everybody safe. Part of the work that we're doing with Southern Success is around adversity, trauma, and resilience. And one of the first principles of trauma-informed practices is safety. People have to feel that they're safe, physically and emotionally safe. It's one of the first principles of it. And if we use that as a way to have the discussions with our school districts, say, let's make sure that people are safe, however that's defined for particular families, I think we can be a positive force in supporting our teachers with their negotiations and their discussions with our school districts.
And it's going to take a lot of creativity to do some thinking outside the box, like the thing you just mentioned about middle schools. We don't know what all the answers are, but we can work on it together. We can all figure it out. The combination of the folks in the Oregon Health Department in Salem, I watched some of those programs from the governor and the leadership there. They're working on it, but we can also work on it here, like you said, talking here in Three Rivers School District or other ones in Jackson County. We can figure these things out. That is a balance between, like the essential workers have to go back to work, so their kids have got to be someplace. But how can we do this in a way that we have enough social distancing and enough care to how we do it, that we don't raise the virus contagion by doing it?
Yep.
And that's going to be a big challenge. The experts that I hear are saying we are going to have a second wave. We're not in it yet. We're still in the first wave.
Yep.
And if we look at the 1918 pandemic, which I've studied a bunch in public health school, that the second wave was worse than the first. Yes. By a long shot. So I don't want to sound like doom and gloom. I don't feel that way. I just feel like we've got to be really smart. We've got to work smart here. And that means a lot of people reaching out to each other to figure out what are the best ideas to get this accomplished. Absolutely.
Absolutely. And outdoors is a good place too. I mean, as long as we have good weather, we should get our kids outdoors, If we're going to bring them back to any sort of facility, they should be outdoors whenever possible. So there's a question about how can we best support Jerry's campaign? It's not rocket science. It's everything is connections. Everything's personal connections. It is using your email list. It is using your contact list to make sure people know about Jerry and what Jerry's fighting for, but also knowing about what his opponent is and who he is, and his kind of really off the wall approaches to virtually everything, and how it'd be disastrous to have Art Robinson in the state Senate. The Senate is already kind of dysfunctional from my point of view as a House member. I always thought the Senate's kind of dysfunctional, but he would make it so much more so. And then Jerry's got the right themes. Jerry's talking about jobs. He's talking about affordable housing, and that's what Josephine County needs, and that's what the state needs. So just use your networks. Use your networks relentlessly. Get your personal. I think that the word that the political consultants use is validator. You're the validators for Jerry's campaign. Jerry can say whatever the hell he wants to, and people will believe him or not, but you're the validators. When you contact your friends and contact people on your email lists and your other social media lists, you validate his campaign for them. So that's the most important thing you can do. Send him some bucks, always helps too. But the most important thing you can do is validate his campaign and get word out about his campaign. And I was talking to Jerry this weekend, really focus on the Democrats in Josephine County, but also on the non-affiliated voters, probably living in places that are fairly sympathetic to Democratic politics. The non-affiliated voters maybe in particular parts of Grants Pass, particular parts of the Illinois Valley or the Applegate Valley. Just really try to get that information out. Someone said, I know nothing about Art Robinson. What's a source of real info? Oh, just
goodness.
Google Art Robinson. I mean,
Oh,
just
Michelle. Oh,
Google
goodness.
Art Robinson's ideas, and Google Art Robinson wants to collect your urine, and right there you got a tremendous amount of information.
There's
from it.
there's
you
a
go
good
to
site
the,
that Peter DeFazio made when Robinson was running against him, and it's still up and available to see. He's
a lot of the information is on the Josephine County Democrats website. You can look there. You can find that Art Robinson has proposed abolishing the education system and going all the way back to homeschooling for everybody.
Yep.
Who allegedly keep school teachers from indoctrinating children and turning them into homosexuals, or I don't know what else his ideas are on that, but that's one of them. And we can see how that homeschooling only has been working out in the last 4 or 5 months. It's pretty tough on working families.
It is.
So, that's not a great plan. He has a plan for using aerial spraying to spread toxic nuclear waste all over the state of Oregon because he says it's perfectly safe. There's plenty of other ideas there. The key thing is we need cooperative, hardworking, competent, friendly people in the legislature who can roll up their sleeves and work with each other and not just rant and have partisan bickering. We don't need that. We're in a time of crisis. It's all hands on deck. We need to get this done. I do want to share with you folks a couple of the ideas for what we're going to do over the next coming sets of weeks. We're going to do some town halls on listening to young voices. We want to hear what the young people have to say. And if you know young people, say between 18 and 30, who might be willing to be on a panel with us, we want to bring them in. We want to hear what concerns are on their hearts and minds. We want to make them feel welcome and really part of the dialogue. We need to bring out the youth vote for whoever they're going to vote for. We want them to show up and turn that ballot into the mailbox, and we want them to be involved. So we're going to do some listening to youth voices. We're also going to work on how do we fund this Oregon recovery. I think I mentioned that already. We're going to look at green bonds and infrastructure investments, all those kind of things. And there's one other thing that you could do, each of you out there, if you have people that you know, say that aren't here tonight on this Zoom call, and you would like to host a house party for those folks, I'll show up on Zoom. We can make that happen, and we can enlarge the conversation to get more people talking. And if you know people who might, for instance, like to contribute or in one way or another, money or being a volunteer to do phone banking, we aim to try to reach 6,000 non-affiliated voters within the next 3 to 4 weeks, 5 weeks maybe, to talk to them. And we can stratify that group too. So we're going to look at folks who have a score of between 50 and 100. That means the non-affiliated voters who lean a little bit progressive, a little bit left. So it isn't such a tough conversation. We're talking with people who might already be receptive. And we want to find out what's on their heart, what's on their minds about, are they concerned about healthcare? Are they concerned about jobs, affordable housing? And then we'll get back to them with some of the work that I'm putting forward about what our stand is. And that's been used in other places to move a county toward a progressive direction and where we can get something done. So I need help with that. You can help with it. If you want to find people that would like to volunteer, send them on over and we'll get them involved. So let's see. Do we have some more questions here?
I think we have a bunch of info from your campaign on Art Robinson, a lot of websites for people to go be horrified by.
Well, one of the questions I don't think you got to, because it came after the question about how we can support Jerry's campaign. David was asking, is there any structure for folks to share a computer or internet connection with students that don't have it? And I do recall that there was a program that they were providing free internet to students.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was Spectrum or Charter.
It was charter, I believe. But I got to say, the school districts did an incredible job. They don't get nearly enough uh, applause for what they've done. I mean, they went within a week's time. They went to distance learning. Grants Pass School District, Three Rivers School District, getting tablets out to students, driving them to their houses, setting up food programs, setting up their bus system, so their school buses would be delivering food, breakfasts and lunches to students on the bus route.
Wow.
It was phenomenal. I mean, it just is remarkable what they accomplished in such a short period of time. And what I loved about even the Oregon Department of Education, their instructions started off with saying, relationships are the most important thing that we're worried about right now. Maintain strong and positive relationships with your students. And the second thing was, make sure they have food. I mean, that was, to me, the brilliant thing that the Oregon Department of Education did, to say, those are your priorities. Maintain the relationships, make sure the kids have food, the basic necessities. And then we'll talk about the rest of the education part. So they did a great job of getting tablets to kids, and they set up hotspots throughout Southern Oregon. There are hotspots where if people didn't have internet access, they could drive to a library, or they drive to even a grocery store parking lot in some communities, where they could access a hotspot in order to access online education. But as Jerry mentioned earlier, it didn't work for every family. I mean, it doesn't. Some families can do that for just so long before they just don't have the capacity for continuing online learning. So the more that we can help districts figure out ways that kids that need to come to a center or come to a place in order to access adults who will help them get through their curriculum that they're covering safely, I think the better off we are, because online learning doesn't work for every kid. It's just not there. The legislature also appropriated a significant number of dollars just last month to make sure that we're increasing broadband access to rural areas. But we're never going to be perfect on that, and it's never going to work absolutely for every family. We still need that human connection at our school facilities in a safe way.
No, I want to hark back to our our first town hall 2 weeks ago, which was on affordable housing, and a question was asked at that town hall that we didn't get to answer, but I got some information about it, which is about apartments and affordable housing. And what I found was a very interesting story. It happened back during the Carter administration in New York City, that some folks came up with the idea of taking some public housing projects and saying basically to the people that live there, would you like to turn this into a condominium where we will have you pay off this facility, and it will cost you about the same as you're paying in rent now, but it will be a mortgage payment. And it was interesting what happened, because crime in those blocks went down 92%. 92%. And you think about it, people, they own those places. They don't want them trashed. They don't want problems there. It's their home. And of course, then President Reagan came in and they stopped the thing. But it was very illustrative that what we want to do with affordable housing is give people a stake. Give people a stake in this situation where they can have their own home, and they can be a part of the community in a way that is stronger, and that also builds jobs. So anyway, I'm not going to go all the way back into the affordable housing thing. I love to talk about it, and I'm going to be talking about it again and again as we go through the campaign, because key questions are coming up. Okay, we need to do all these good things. How are we going to pay for them? Well, partly how we're going to pay for them is enlarging the tax base by having more homes built so that people pay property taxes when you build that house. And we enlarge that without having to raise taxes on the existing families that are already paying property tax. So anyway, I just wanted to report that thing about apartments because I thought it was a really interesting point. It shows that there's a number of ways that we can do that in rural settings where they do have apartment complexes. Out here in the country, it's probably going to be more duplexes. Those have a quicker rate of return on them. So we have, let's see, another, please talk more about the public housing in New York City. These were, I don't know the full answer to that. Gary and Dorothy put in that question. Were those government owned or were there private landlords that had to be negotiated? I believe it was government owned facilities. I will get an answer for that and be ready to answer that question more fully. But it certainly is an inspiring story. And if we want to talk about how do we improve our communities and our lower crime and do all of those things, it shows that affordable housing can be a part of that.
So, Jerry, just to mention the Community Health Improvement Plan, if people haven't heard about this, every so often the hospitals, the clinics, the healthcare providers have to do a community health assessment and then a community health improvement plan. And this year they were able to do it together for the first time ever in Jackson-Jefferson County. The hospitals, all the medical providers, everybody did together. And they came up with their community health improvement plan. And housing was the #1 health issue that was identified by the healthcare community. That if we can get housing to people, and obviously things like Rogue Retreat, they're showing very clearly if you get people some stability, their health outcomes improve tremendously. But I think it's very encouraging that the healthcare sector, working with the human services sector, came up with the priorities of housing #1, behavior health #2, and #3 being parent education and support. So how do we make sure parents have the information they need so that they can help raise kids in a way that the kids can prosper? So if you haven't already read it, the Jefferson Regional Health Alliance is the organization that coordinated the plan, and the plan's online at their website. I encourage you to read it. It's a great document for our region. So for our region to have a community health improvement plan that states very clearly housing, behavior health, parent education and support, that's what our community needs to be healthy. And I just want to give a plug for that before we signed off.
That's great. Thank you, Peter. And I think that there's going to be more discussion about this whole thing about housing and how we do it. I know the housing that I'm seeing being built right now that's ready to break ground in Cape Junction is housing that is, part of it is duplexes, and these homes are solar ready. They can't afford to put solar on them and keep the price down, but they're solar ready. So you could put the panels on and they're all set to go with that. They're clean energy homes that are built with very high standards of insulation. And so we're actually going to help the environment, because by building this way, a cleaner Oregon, we're going to reduce the impact of energy so that we, the degree to which we reduce that, we help the climate crisis. So we've got a lot of things that are folding together in the good things that we do in one area help us in another area, so that we can build Oregon back better. And that's you're going to hear me saying that a lot. BOBB, build Oregon back better. We can do this. I know Joe Biden talks about build back better. Well, that's good. Let's build Oregon back better. And we can do this. I think we've come to 7:30. It says 7:30 here. So I think we're at the end of our time. If everybody's asked their questions, I want to give my thanks to everybody who showed up tonight, and especially to Peter Buckley, who's taken time to be with us here. I find everything you have to say inspiring. So I want to hear more from you. And so maybe we can find a way to get to get Peter to move over here. That's who we need, really. People like Peter. Yeah, we get Peter to move over here, but no, you're not very far away. And actually, a lot of the work in Josephine and Jackson County is more and more together. That's true of the fire districts. It's true of many of the other groupings that we're stronger together. So it's great. Thank you for being here with us. I want to continue to encourage people to send your donations, because $50, if you haven't done it, there's an Oregon tax credit. You can fund our campaign and continue to ask your friends to be a part of it. And we'll be planning on doing one next Monday night. We don't have it organized quite yet, but we will soon. So thank you again. Thank you, Peter.
Take care, everybody.